Hi, this is Spencer Brown recording my case study screencast for Module 15 for AEP 858. What I know about the case study is attendance has been growing at an alarming rate at my school. I'm a first-year administrator and I've just completed my first semester. The superintendent has come down and said this is a concern. We need to get it fixed. So everyone really is at play in this. All levels of the USD or employees should have some concern. Clearly, the superintendent does. I do. The teaching staff should. There's definitely a lack of clarity about these policies and procedures, and we're going to get to the bottom of what the issue is there. All stakeholders should be involved and concerned because we are not giving adequate attention to the students and we're underserving them, which I'll discuss why as we go. In terms of the individual students, Karen is a junior, A's and B's freshman, sophomore year, inducted to the National Honor Society sophomore year, then apparently was married prior to 11th grade. Her grades and attendance have waned. Parents have requested conferences with teachers to which it seems to be no avail, and counselor does not have any record of follow-up either. Tyrone is a 10th grader with 14 absences. He's missed because of 2 family trips, which they assured the school they would be doing educational type activities on the trip, and that he would keep all of his work caught up for his classes. The homeroom teacher signed off on these as acceptable, even though district policy allows up to 3 days for personal use, and administrator's role is to sign off on excused absences that fall outside the realms of doctor visits, illness, and um, family or close relative death. Christina is a freshman with 12 absences. It's been 4 consecutive days, 3 different times. Her church minister apparently is the one who's requested the absences, and there's no mention of whether the parents were involved in that. Again, the homeroom teacher is the one who signed off on it, which has caused her to miss 2 major exams in algebra and give her lacking grades, to say the least, although they are passing. And again, we have the issue of more than 3 personal days and not the administrator signing off. Carl is a 10th grade student who goes to half-day vocational school. He misses randomly. Parents have kind of said we give him the autonomy to go or to not go if he's not feeling well. And the dad said if he were to just drop out, he could go to work where I work. So he was referred to truancy in November. And it's interesting that although this is the only student referred to truancy, he also happens to be the only student where we have record of talking with parents. And I'm curious if that's protocol. We wait until we refer to truancy officers to make contact with parents. But at any rate, we have noticed that he has younger siblings in feeder patterns, and we want to check on their attendance and put preventative practices in place for them before they get to us. John is the quarterback. He was injured in preseason. He has physical therapy many days from noon to 2:30. And the AD has requested actually that John not that he be dismissed from his classes Friday afternoons to get adequate rest during football season. The AD is a 10-year veteran employee with 5 state championships, and teachers have not reported these absences as excessive. So there's a lot of legal and ethical issues at play here. The first and foremost is school policies not being applied. Administrator is not the one excusing these absences, which is clearly outlined in policy. There's been an overuse of personal days. If we followed the actual policy, there'd be more than one student being referred with truancy here. And there's no preventative system in place. So there was no system in place to catch these kids. It was just at the end of the semester, let's look and see how we did. Oh, we've got these 5 kids who didn't come to school a lot. That's a problem, and that's a real ethical issue because we have this data throughout the semester. And if we have the data, we have an ethical responsibility to do something with it, not just let it run its course and then deal with it at the end of the semester. We have significant needs for intervention that never get recognized because of this. Football is being prioritized for John over education, which is certainly an ethical and really legal issue. And there's a serious ethical legal issue with Christina if her parents have not been involved in her being excused from school. Prince versus Massachusetts is a really interesting case for Tyrone because they have said we're going to do educational activities, and Prince versus Massachusetts said parents have the obligation to ensure their children receive adequate education. And so this is going to be an interesting one that comes to play when we talk about solutions for Tyrone. Single sentence synthesis is simple. Golden Oaks High School has no preventative practice in place to ensure that those attendance policies are being enacted first and are effective, and that students are, and because of this, students are suffering in the face of this lack of professionalism and or structure in the school. So there's a lot of unknowns going on here. I don't know what level of knowledge these parents have of some of these situations. I don't know what level of knowledge staff has of the policy in place. I don't know what students' aspirations and needs are. This is particularly important to Carl because are we making education relevant for him? I don't know a lot about some of these places, so I don't know some specific things about the school. I don't know what protocols are in place. I don't know what the school culture has been like, if it's a lot of independent contractors or if it's a collaborative culture. I don't know if there's collaborative teams, which will play an important role in my solution. I don't know what home life's like. I know about the demographics of the community, but I don't know what their expectation of the school is. Would they be ones who would back John not going to class because he's the high school quarterback and we win state championships? Or would they have a serious issue with that? And I don't know some of these things about the program in terms of what protocols aren't in place or at least established, even if they're not in place. Or am I starting from scratch on ensuring that we have adequate protocols? And if so, I would really be interested in what other schools' procedures are. As a first-year administrator, it's important for me to build up my professional community, to learn from those who have gone before me. And if there happens to be schools in district that are doing really well with attendance, I need to be looking to them to learn more about what they might have in place. So I chose this graphic for stakeholder considerations because at the end of the day, this is a really foggy situation, and I don't know why, but families and staff are one of three things. They either misunderstand what policy is out there, which in that case we need to just define it more clearly, or they've decided we're going to take autonomy here, and they've been enabled to do so, and we've said, well, I'm not going to step on anyone's toes, so let's let people do their thing. Or they're completely unaware that there is policy. They just are operating to the best of their own knowledge and trying to act in ethical ways that they may or may not be prepared to do. So I need to investigate which of these three is prevalent. But the bottom line is attendance is foggy. Attendance policy is foggy in this school, and I need to figure out why so that I can offer some clarity there. And then the final stakeholders are students. They're being underserved because we are not catching them prior to them missing 14 days in a semester. That's a big issue. We don't have the preventative practices in place to ensure that they're getting adequate education. So we have some options. The first, we could just do nothing, right? That is an option. We could take a case-by-case approach, ensure that those 5 students get real adequate attention, put some interventions in place for them, and try to close the gap for them as we go through the rest of the year. In this situation, we're ignoring the systemic issue, and we'll handle more kids as they come across our table. Or we take the systemic approach and say, you know what, these 5 happened, let's do better as a system and limit this opportunity. Let's put some preventative practices in place to make sure we catch it earlier on. But these 5, it happened, and let's just figure out a way to get through the year with them. Or we do a blend of both, right? We take it case by case, and we put some systemic places in practice. And so if we went this route, I want to touch more on what this case by case looks like. Karen, she needs parental conferences because they requested it, and it's unbelievable that those would not occur after their request. Tyrone, we first need to start with a clear understanding of what policy is moving forward, but then we need to have some conversations about how do we ensure that that Tyrone's still being provided with adequate educational opportunity if he's going on some of these trips. Are there staff members who would be willing to work with Tyrone to have custom assignments made with some project-based learning involved in the educational settings that he's going to visit? Christina's parents definitely need to start with communication with them first and say, are you aware that this is happening? And if not, this is going to be a serious issue. If they are, then we need to revisit the idea of 3 personal days with them as well. Carl, we need to revisit his IPS, his individual plan of study, and say, what are your dreams? Where are you wanting to go in life? And how do we make school more relevant for you to make you want to be here? John needs to be at school on Friday, period. There's no reason to be resting prior to a game day. And maybe this is the way it's always been done. We're going to put an end to it right now and assume positive intent when we do that. And if we have to have difficult conversations with the AD or anyone else involved at that point, we can do that then. And we need to look at physical therapy and say, is there any time to do it maybe starting at 7 a.m. or something like that would be less impactful on your school day. Conferences need to be held with the homeroom teachers, AD, counselor, and other staff that was involved in not ensuring the policy that's in place is enacted. And then the systemic side, we need to begin to put some preventative practices in place with early warnings and ensure clarity on common vocabulary of what is an excused versus unexcused absence. Whose job is it to define that when it's not clearly laid out in the 3 exceptions of illness, doctor, or death of a family member. If I do nothing, I should plan to look for another job. The superintendent was fairly clear on that. If I went case by case, those 5 students could see great benefit and we could have some great mastery experiences of, man, look what we did. We turned it around for these kiddos, but we still leave the door open for other students to walk through and fall through the cracks, and then we just deal with them as time comes as well, which is, it's insufficient. If I go systemic, I still have these 5 students who need intensive support, and there's no reason that I should just be saying, well, it is what it is, let's just make it better for the future. We need to be doing a blend of both. Right? We need to do a blend of both in consultation with all stakeholder groups to understand how we can better utilize case-by-case and systemic approaches. And that's my section of 8, right? We want to look at the big picture, and we want to focus in on these few students to make it better for them. So we want to look at multiple levels here. So implementation is simple. First, further investigation. I've got to figure out why it was so foggy. So that may include some stakeholder surveys of how aware are you of the attendance policies, ask some specific scenarios to know who they would talk to. And that's at all levels, parents, students, staff. And then I need to find out from that might lead me to the intent of misconduct. Are we intentionally just saying, I know what the policy is, I don't care? And if so, that's going to cause some difficult conversations. But conversations that will be had nonetheless. And then we need to handle the 5 students individually, as I described previously, to really dig into what's going on there and put some interventions in place for those kiddos, including some formative assessment, weekly checkups to say, are we having an impact on these kiddos' attendance moving forward? And then we need the systemic address. We need to put PD in place to clearly outline the common languages and practices regarding absences. We need to find very clearly whose role is what and whose responsibilities are what. Establish monthly checks. So every month we look and say, how are absences with any individual student, right? Early warning systems include absences, grades, and office discipline referrals. But certainly with absences, monthly check. Ensure communication is sent to parents saying, hey, this is the way it goes from here on out. And then I personally need to be conducting accountability checks bi-weekly to make sure these practices are being adhered to. The standard at play here was program completers understand and demonstrate the capacity to evaluate, develop, and advocate for a data-informed and equitable resourcing plan that supports school improvement and student development. I believe I've shown each of these levels from the student level to the system level, how I'm developing a plan that is data informed and preventative to help advocate for those kiddos before they ever reach a threshold of concern in terms of absences. Thanks for listening.